A very warm welcome to today's live webinar session from Blue2, the Sailing Academy. We are truly excited for today's session because we have the company YACHT-POOL here as our special guest, and YACHT-POOL is also our go-to partner when it comes to handling charter insurance matters. And I'd like to welcome our speaker, Sammy, right now. Everyone knows him as Sammy, and Sammy is head of the Charter Skipper Insurance at YACHT-POOL. Sammy, hello and welcome. Let me bring you on screen in a moment. So Sammy, hello, good to see you.
Hello, Michael. Good to see you. Hello, everybody. A very pleasant good evening to you all. Yeah, I'm genuinely excited for this webinar tonight and very happy to be here. I'd like to thank you, Michael, for the fantastic collaboration with you, Blue2, and the Sailing Academy. Working together is a real pleasure and has been an incredibly valuable and rewarding experience for everyone involved so far.
And today we're going to go through some of the products again. That was more or less the idea we had in mind, that we'd use lots of examples to explain things a bit better, because insurance is always pretty dry, but when you have a good example, you can picture it quite well. For those of you watching out there, it's really important. We also have the chat section open. Use the chat section if you have any questions. We will try to address the questions with Semi, and we'll answer them there. If they are relevant to the topic, also discuss them.
Before I get started, dear charter skipper, I just wanted to quickly let you all know that chartering a boat is still, year after year, honestly, one of the absolute highlights and best experiences for the charter skipper and his entire crew. Our goal here tonight is absolutely not to scare you with any of this information, but is simply to carefully guide you through the charter insurance policies we offer, the ones that are genuinely important for your operations, so that you can walk away with a clear understanding and some truly valuable practical feedback. To provide you with some general background information, what you should even get the insurance for, which policies are truly essential, and which charter insurance is more of an optional choice for you to decide on, whether this particular risk is actually worth covering or not. That's precisely why I'm genuinely looking forward to our webinar this evening.
That's precisely what we'll be doing today, and our slogan is, as a training facility, we want to ensure you're safe on the sailing tour. Today, we want you to be properly insured while you're on the sailing tour, and I think we'll just get started with it. Sammy, you'll get things started with the presentation, and we'll carefully walk through each detail step by step. And if you have any questions, please use the chat and just type them in. Okay, Sammy, the floor is all yours. Thank you. Then you can go ahead and start.
My dears, I'd like to briefly tell you the story behind YACHT-POOL. The company YACHT-POOL was originally founded back in 1976 by Dr. Friedrich Schöchel. He actually wanted absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the insurance business at all initially, through his involvement with the family-owned company Sunbeam. He became aware of the prevailing conditions, the specific conditions at that time for both yacht owners and boat owners. And he took it upon himself to completely rewrite these terms, thereby pioneering and establishing the concept of all-risk coverage, which at the time for the owner constituted a truly massive revolution and was an absolute sensation compared to the individual peril policies. Unfortunately, this product cannot be patented, and as a result, it is naturally being copied by competing companies. Moving on to the compulsory skipper's insurance, where he once again identified the potential risks facing charter skippers, recognized the existing coverage gaps, and with that insight, he brought both the crucial skipper's liability insurance and other charter-specific insurances into existence, such as charter deposit insurance and charter cancellation insurance.
Nobody has that. Nobody just has bad conditions anymore. I think we should start from scratch. Thanks for the explanations. For me, what's important is when I charter a boat and I found my dream boat, then the question is, this boat already has insurance policies. You've heard there's comprehensive coverage, there's liability insurance. As a charter customer, that's something I don't need to concern myself with at the moment. Maybe you can go into these two, comprehensive and liability insurance, a bit more here.
Yes, that's correct, dear Michael. A launched ship typically carries liability insurance and possibly also comprehensive coverage will actually occur, and that uncertainty makes the entire insurance situation quite complicated and really difficult to assess beforehand. The conditions state what is insured and what is excluded. That's precisely where the problems begin for charter skippers. So we created these specific charter policies to cover those gaps and provide a comprehensive safety net.
Exactly, but we'll take a look at that in detail later. Now let's first look at when I charter a boat. There is comprehensive insurance on that boat. So you can get an idea what is included in the comprehensive insurance and what does it look like. Oh, so the hull insurance, right?
The boat's comprehensive hull insurance covers any impact damage to your own vessel, for example, damage resulting from a collision. This coverage includes damage resulting from accidents, collisions, theft, vandalism, fire, and natural disasters. The insurance policy comes into effect to cover the full costs of any necessary repairs or a complete replacement of the boat. It's crucial to understand that the hull insurance typically only covers damage to the insured boat itself and does not extend to any damage caused to the owner or to other third parties. It's important to know that hull insurance only covers damage to the boat that you cause yourself and does not extend to any other types of incidents or damages.
Okay, so the hull insurance is specifically on the boat, and it's the charterer who has taken it out. And the amount, of course, depends on the size of the boat and the price it originally cost. And essentially, it's like, as we'll get into later, that basically the deductible, that's what we're really referring to when we talk about the actual security deposit amount required. So that's definitely one thing I don't have to worry about beforehand if I'm chartering a boat. That's already on the boat. Is that the correct way to say it, Sammy?
And that's precisely where we proceed forward by taking the next essential step in the overall process, which is entirely focused on gaining a very clear, specific understanding and a precise definition of what exactly is meant by that particular term in this specific context.
Well, it depends on the insurance provider, yes, and I've already received a question from our users which fits quite well right now, and that is user DP. I'll show that once asks, what does, as a rule, the yacht is insured mean?
So, what is meant by that is the assumption that the yacht is insured, which is what the association is supposed to be. But practice repeatedly shows otherwise. We also have specific documented cases where, for instance, charter companies have neglected to pay their insurance premiums. That would indicate they may have been experiencing a liquidity shortfall at that moment. And the figures are only liquid on paper, unlimitedly liable, and that's really the core issue at hand. There's no cap on that liability, no matter how minor or major the negligence might be, which creates a significant financial exposure for the skipper in any given situation, if necessary, with his very own assets.
That would mean, if I summarize this now, usually the yacht is insured with comprehensive and liability insurance, but we don't know. Is the coverage amount sufficient? Is the insurance premium paid, etc.? So you could summarize it that way.
So that's how it is, yes. And we'll just go through the topic one more time, and then we'll see how it all turns out in the end.
Now, just perhaps for the viewer, very quickly, we focus specifically today on charter insurance. If you have any questions regarding your personal insurance, please send an email to Sammy or me. We can wrap things up quickly. Today, we really focus specifically on the charter insurance for sailing trips. Otherwise, it would just be too much. All right, so we've already talked about the hull insurance, and we've also mentioned the second one, which is the liability insurance. Maybe you can just quickly run through that as well.
Boat liability insurance provides coverage for the financial damages incurred by third parties as a result of being caused by the insured boat. This can include things such as personal injuries, damages to other boats, landing stages, or other property. The liability insurance steps in to settle any claims and thereby protects the boat owner from the resulting financial consequences that they may face. The liability insurance is especially important because boats, due to their considerable weight and size and speed, can typically cause quite a bit of significant damage.
Yes, and I've got a perfect example for you, Sammy. I've just gone and borrowed myself a boat. And when I set off, I completely forgot to unplug the power cable and ended up wrecking the entire power box, maybe even ripping the whole fixture right out of the socket. Now, many people probably think, okay, so there's been some damage. Wouldn't that be a good fit for a liability insurance claim?
In this particular instance, it does indeed qualify as a liability insurance claim because the electrical box which belongs to the marina has been significantly damaged. In this case, it's advisable that the skipper, of course, goes to see the harbor master to officially report this damage and also informs his insurance company. It's always the standard liability insurance, the boat's own insurance, so the insurance provider is the first party that is actually responsible for covering the incurred damage. And then, if the damage claim is simply unjustified, meaning it's rejected, then the skipper's liability insurance comes into play. The skipper's liability insurance only steps in as a secondary payer if there is any specific reason for rejection from the other liability insurance.
That's the main chunk we'll be tackling on the next slide, where I expect a lot of questions will come up. However, this particular electrical box would actually be covered by the boat's liability insurance.
And that is precisely the problem, and that's why it's fairly straightforward to understand. What rejection letters from the boat's liability insurance can indicate, it might just be stipulated in the policy terms and that the skipper is liable up to a certain amount for a liability claim. That's something you can't possibly know beforehand. Or there are simply certain damages that might be excluded. We don't know that either.
There's a good question from Martina, because Martina is asking exactly the right thing, you know. How could I possibly know in advance? What sort of insurance coverage does the other driver actually have? I can't possibly look into the entire insurance policy document to check whether the coverage amount is high enough. So what's your advice on that matter?
Absolutely right. So no one can realistically read through 40 pages of terms and conditions at the door. First of all, nothing in Croatian and not in Spanish either, and not in Greek either. And even if they're written in German, a layperson won't be able to spot the gaps and missing parts. There are certain cases where a confirmation is sent out that the boat has insurance, but you still can't actually tell from that confirmation what is specifically covered by the insurance and what is excluded from the policy.
And if the premium's paid?
We can't verify that either. Let's just assume the premium's been paid. There are certain gaps in the coverage where things are excluded. Let me give you an example using person-specific placards. It doesn't help the skipper at all. That the ship is liability insured. Only divers and swimmers are liability insured. So it's of no use to me as the captain if I happen to strike a swimmer or a diver that the vessel owner's liability insurance would cover the resulting damage. But if I now have a typical case as a boat operator where I perform a patent jibe and the crew member gets hit on the head by the boom, that gets rejected by the liability insurance because it's not covered by the insurance, and we have such examples and such gaps. It is covered by the skipper's liability insurance, which applies in this instance.
And if, as you've just pointed out, something unexpected were to occur, then we are in a position where the coverage from both of these insurance policies would come into effect and provide the necessary protection. If we have uncertainties here and there and don't even know if the yacht is insured highly enough, well, now, of course, that's where the invention comes in. You can really be proud of that. That was invented by Dr. Schurkel many years ago, this skipper liability insurance, which basically helps us to effectively fill in and properly close those specific gaps. And maybe you can say a little something about that.
Yes, of course. As mentioned, as just stated, the basic principle is that the skipper's liability insurance initially only provides coverage on a subsidiary basis. Subsidiary always means that in any situation where a liability claim is formally rejected by the charter company's own insurance, it is the skipper's own liability policy that then steps in to provide the coverage. A rejection can simply be due to, as I said, an unpaid premium, an insufficient sum insured, or simply because certain events are explicitly excluded from the policy's terms and coverage. We have a very good example for that because it's mostly examples that make things easier and clearer. The police chief of Vienna, that incident happened a few years back during a harbor maneuver in Croatia. He ended up damaging the neighboring boat. The neighboring boat was a rather costly motorboat that had just been given a completely fresh paint job. The total damage ended up being roughly 30,000 euros. expensive boat. So the police chief reacted correctly by immediately notifying both the harbor master and his rental company about the entire incident and the damage. Only the liability insurance, specifically the rental company, has completely denied the claim. Unfortunately, the owner of the expensive motorboat was ultimately left with no other recourse available but to take legal action against the skipper and demand the full payment amount from him, so to speak. Yes, YACHT-POOL naturally took on this case. We fully covered the costs for the damage to the affected party, and the legal proceedings are still currently ongoing within the court system. The total costs are now at 80,000 euros. The fact is, it's through the skipper's liability insurance that the police president from Vienna fortunately had the skipper's liability insurance, and the entire case is court costs, legal fees. You can't imagine how many costs we've incurred. As I said, we've gone from 30,000 euros to 80,000 euros in damages, and there is still no settlement whatsoever in sight, just because the boat's liability insurer simply refused to pay out for the damages incurred.
Yeah, and so Sammy, are we actually already on the next slide? And I think this skipper liability insurance is indeed called liability insurance, but you already mentioned that earlier. It would also apply to damages to your own ship. That's what I understood correctly. So if damage occurs to your own ship, even if it's due to gross negligence, as I gathered, the skipper's liability insurance would kick in.
The skipper's liability insurance only provides coverage for damages to the chartered yacht, but it only applies in cases where gross negligence is either clearly involved or at least strongly suspected. Okay, so what's meant by that is specifically property damage to the chartered yacht, which is caused faultily by the skipper or by a crew member, but if the extent of the damage does not go beyond the amount of the deposited security deposit, then the hull insurer doesn't get involved. When does the hull insurer get involved? The hull insurer will definitely get involved when the damage is substantially higher than the collateral deposit amount. All right, I'm going to give you an example. If there is a fundamental threat and the damage comes to about 20,000 euros or 15,000 euros, you don't have to go that far. And the security deposit that was placed is, say, 3,000 euros. The comprehensive insurance company here is certainly going to try its luck and will at least make an attempt to write to the skipper personally in order to demand the legally stipulated amount of the skipper's deductible from them. That is absolutely their right, and that is definitely a crucial topic for skippers to be aware of, liability insurance, because the comprehensive insurer is pursuing the skipper here for recourse under suspicion of gross negligence. Let's put it this way, and from now on, YACHT-POOL takes over the case and defends the skipper. Sometimes it gets resolved through a letter from YACHT-POOL to the hull insurer where we explain that it wasn't gross negligence, and sometimes cases drag on for years in court, and we're all dependent on a judge's final ruling and the specific evidence that ultimately gets presented during the proceedings. There are cases where it's clearly gross negligence, everyone recognizes it, and we immediately accept it, saying, okay, we don't need to debate that. We cover it, we pay for it, or there are other cases where we are of the opinion where we state that it's absolutely not correct, the skipper did not act with gross negligence here. We defend the skipper, and the legal fees and defense costs alone are absolutely and truly enormous. And the court costs are enormous, and all of that is covered by the skipper's liability insurance. Yes.
Now, Sammy, sorry I wasn't there for the breakdown, but I took away two things. Let's assume we have a completely normal case. Some damage occurs, and it wasn't due to any gross negligence, so I assume my entire security deposit is lost and it's gone. But if it's normal damage, then the comprehensive insurance will typically cover the entire cost, even if the damage now goes way above my deposit amount. Yes, that's precisely why we have the concept of gross negligence included. If the comprehensive insurance denies the claim there, arguing no, you were grossly negligent, then it becomes crucial to have this liability insurance in place. It would step in subsidiarily and say, look, we'll help you out now. That's what it's designed for. Yes. And I've just heard it used to always be said that there actually has to be a court application or a court proceeding, a legal case, ready to go, already properly in place. for that process to get started. But you recently told me that you actually start providing support to the skippers significantly earlier than that. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. It doesn't have to wait until the situation gets all the way to court. So we respond immediately as soon as the skipper just gets a letter, for instance, and we assist the skipper by providing full guidance through the entire claims process, helping them to gather all the necessary documentation to make it a smooth experience. What he has to do. In many cases, the situation resolves itself straight away, and the entire process is quite straightforward. And naturally, there are also cases where we simply initiate direct contact with the hull insurer internally and take over managing that part of the process for them.
Beforehand, you proactively get involved with the skipper, perhaps even to prevent a court hearing from happening, and you tell them, we are here to help you out. Now the chat area is already bubbling up. I need to go ahead and put the questions in again for a bit. Specifically, Wolfgang, I'll bring it up on screen. He asks, is there liability insurance for non-gross negligence? Now, I'm not exactly sure what is meant by that, but perhaps it means whether liability insurance acknowledges the concept of gross negligence. You can certainly say something about that, right?
Now, with the skipper liability insurance, it was actually invented specifically for that reason by Dr. Schöckel, because he specifically included gross negligence in the skipper liability insurance, which is never an easy task at all to convince any insurance provider to cover something of that nature. It only concerns the damages to the chartered yacht itself, specifically in the event that the skipper is now held liable for those particular damages. Now, property damage is the third point. The entire issue of whether it was gross negligence is completely irrelevant and not a concern at this stage. The key point is that if I damage the neighbor's boat, it doesn't matter whether it was gross negligence or not. It's the gross negligence. With the skipper's liability, insurance is only an issue for material damage to the chartered yacht.
Therefore, the skipper's own liability insurance policy is kept entirely separate from the claim and is not required to make any kind of financial contribution whatsoever. Because hull insurance can't really get out of it. It can't easily refuse the claim. Hull insurance only denies the claim when it's gross negligence. And that is where you come into the game. That's how I've come to understand it.
As I said, the comprehensive insurer doesn't feel it at all, as long as the total amount remains within the deductible. Yeah, as long as the damage to the boat is higher than the deductible, they try their luck. The hull insurers try to claim the money from the skipper, and if there's no skipper liability insurance, the poor guy who doesn't know any better, they send a letter saying, for example, you have to pay 30,000 euros immediately right now, as an example, or even higher. And there are some people, and then they send another letter, and then, okay, it's enough if you only pay 15,000 euros. And many people fall into that trap and pay the money.
Yes, Sammy, I'm unfortunately going to have to interrupt now because, of course, the questions are just piling up since this is your product as well. And there's a question coming in from Wolfgang. He's practically yelling, it's about damages to a yacht that aren't covered by the security deposit. Let me just pull that up on the screen for everyone. For me, that would mean if I don't purchase insurance for the deposit, then the entire security deposit is gone if the damage ends up being higher than what I've put down. There is the option of your own deposit insurance. We'll be coming back to that later, won't we?
That's exactly right, yes. So if there's damage to the chartered yacht, it's up to the skipper and his crew whether to take out a deposit insurance for this security deposit that's been put down.
Yes, and Arnold writes, oh, I possess a personal liability insurance policy that covers the risks of skippering a chartered yacht. So an additional skipper liability insurance would be unnecessary. The liability insurance he has, of course, it would need to be clarified if it covers damages to the chartered boat itself. We don't know that right now, yeah? And you would have to check that for yourself. What do you think, Sammy? Well, I would say here, there is a reason why the skipper liability insurance exists.
The private liability insurance usually completely excludes high-risk sports. Yes, it's a standard exclusion clause. And even if that is the case, make sure you get that confirmation of coverage in writing from them. Get it documented that when you charter a boat, you need to confirm it's covered by your liability insurance. You will be surprised by the answers and will specifically inquire about what is actually covered under the sums insured in the policy.
I can absolutely state this with complete certainty right now, even before examining the specific terms of anyone's private liability policy, that gross negligence is never included within the standard coverage. Yes, and it's really important that you take a look at that too. Don't be mad, I really can't go through everything right now, but I will then bundle it up so we can make a little more progress in our presentation. So, as you can see already, we really have a lot of questions. And believe me, I will still address your questions. So, very important in summary, the skipper's liability insurance, that essentially covers me for the risks I have in terms of liability and hull insurance coverage. It provides that essential protection. That's where the skipper liability insurance really comes into play because it specifically covers the issue of gross negligence. That's actually the main reason why insurers or hull insurers try to back out and refuse to pay.
So, just to put it briefly, the skipper liability insurance covers subsidiarily liable, culpably caused property damage to third parties or personal injuries. Gross negligence is also covered under the skipper liability insurance, but only in cases where damage occurs to the chartered yacht and the skipper is held liable by the hull insurers. That's precisely when the skipper liability insurance comes into play.
Yeah, great. That means that the point I'm adding now, of course, is this particular skipper liability insurance policy coverage doesn't apply, of course, to any kind of commercial activity. And I'm honestly not sure, Sammy, if you happen to know whether this standard skipper's liability insurance policy also provides coverage when you're actually racing in regattas. Maybe you can say something about that. We'll probably have a slide about it later, I believe.
Yes, I wanted to add that regarding commercial activity, we've prepared a specific slide for that topic. Except the charter insurance that we're currently discussing covers the skipper and his crew for private use. By private, we specifically mean when he's traveling with his family or with his friends. Those are the charter insurances we provide. Feasible and straightforward, there must be no monetary benefit or compensation involved, but we'll address that topic in more detail later on in the presentation. We still have that point to cover now.
We're actually getting to the exact point now. We basically have the hull insurance, we have the liability insurance, and we also have the skipper's liability insurance. And now there's still a little something left, so you still have something about the, okay. That's of course an example of what the skipper's liability insurance is for. That's actually a short story that's not particularly funny, but still, you have to take it in a way that shows the skipper here was actually fine.
Two of the staff at the charter base would press a YACHT-POOL application form into her hand during the trip, and she had absolutely no idea what she was actually signing. Luckily for her, she had ticked the box for the skipper's liability insurance. And that's when it actually happened. The old mooring line turned out to be completely rotten, and they really wanted to take some photos up on this mountain there. Unfortunately, everything went completely wrong, and the ship unfortunately ended up hitting the rocks, and the hull insurer just immediately demanded about 150,000 euros from the skipper. And with just 8 days, that was the payment period she was facing, and that's precisely why the skipper's liability insurance stepped in immediately with our letters, and to her luck, one must truly say, to her great luck, she remains incredibly grateful even now, and that is exactly the kind of typical trap, one that we frequently encounter.
The skipper's liability becomes a topic, a serious case. She can, and now I've written down one more point for myself. You had the bullet point concerning gross breach of duty listed there on the second to last slide, didn't you? And here come the first questions already. Walter is asking, so what exactly is the situation looking like then? Is consuming alcohol, for example, gross negligence? But I think we're already talking about a breach of duty there. What do you think?
Exactly, correct. So unfortunately, alcohol and drug consumption are not insured. That falls under the breach of obligation. It's the same as not following the agreed upon charter. Conditions such as operating the vessel at night when it's explicitly prohibited or deliberately ignoring any restrictions on the designated navigation area, all of that constitutes a breach of obligation or non-compliance, like, for example, failing to wear the required safety vests.
So it could be that in a charter contract it states, I must, and if I don't comply with that, I haven't just been grossly negligent, but I have actually breached the contract itself, and that would be a violation of an obligation.
That's right, exactly. So you have to adhere to all the terms and conditions that are set out by the charter company. Or if it's, for example, a night voyage, you definitely have to make sure you get a formal confirmation that it's been officially approved. So that's obviously very important.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that really great point. Now, I need to make sure we get Chris into the shot, Sammy. So Chris is writing there that means if I have a deposit and I think skipper's liability, I cannot be prosecuted. This policy does cover damages that are to your own property and to third parties, but we cannot confirm that because that is my experience. Actually, it should be that insurance isn't meant to be a free pass for every single thing. Now I can do whatever I want. And I don't know what you think, but a very clever man once told me that even if I'm fully insured, I should always drive as if I had no insurance coverage whatsoever. Always proceed with caution. What's your take on that?
So we are very transparent. So these charter products we're offering are available, and others are entirely optional and can be selected according to your specific requirements, like an excess insurance, which covers your personal deductible in the event of a claim. Because if there's an accident, it can get extremely costly and financially damaging. And ultimately, as I said, when push comes to shove, it's about protecting your own personal assets because the skipper is liable. And specifically, unlimited and unrestricted and unlimitable. And that's not a deposit insurance policy we're discussing right now. We'll get to that topic later too. Let me put it this way. If I put down a 1,000 euro deposit and if I lose it, it doesn't hurt me in the slightest.
A little, it always hurts a little.
A little bit now, but we'll get to my deposit later, and then we'll go into that topic more deeply. What I ultimately want to say is, even if you check all the boxes, what YACHT-POOL currently offers, you're still covered for 98% of the total risk involved. 2% remain, which are cases we ourselves don't know yet.
And there we have we have the breach of duty. There is also the concept of intent. I can't simply just drive straight into a pier solely because I happen to be insured. Then that's intentional, and then nothing's insured. So I would definitely be careful about that and always drive with caution. Yeah?
Absolutely, I would.
All right, so I still have the rest of the questions to get through. And following on from that, it brought me to the point I'll be addressing on the next slide. I think we'll come back to the skipper liability insurance again and again, but pay attention. The breach of duty, that's what's in the charter contract. And that's why a charter contract is very important. And we also have a slide for that. You do have the contract from yourselves, and we'll look at it in more detail a bit later. Once you're ready, Sami, I'd suggest we now move directly into this gap we still need to address. That's actually the deposit amount, isn't it?
Exactly. This would now be the charter deposit insurance. It covers, of course, one must always remember this, damages to the chartered yacht which were caused culpably actions on the part of the charterer, which can be caused either by the skipper or potentially even by members of the crew. Everyone knows that before taking over the boat, you have to deposit the security amount with your credit card. That's what the charter deposit insurance is for. There are different security amounts available. YACHT-POOL offers that too, and especially all year round as well. That means also the skipper liability insurance. Theoretically, all the products we offer are valid for 12 months. And regarding the charter deposit insurance, it's that. By now, we used to say it's fundamentally about preserving a harmonious relationship between the skipper and the crew, just so that the overall mood doesn't turn sour. Because until recently, the deposit amounts were still what you have to put down, let's say, okay, yes, but as you have all certainly noticed in recent years, everything's gotten more expensive. Boats with 2,000 euro deposits then are 3 now, 3 became 4. And by now it's become extremely expensive, and it really hurts when you lose a 3,000 euro deposit like that. Therefore, we recommend the charter deposit insurance. And with that, there's no discussion with the skipper and crew about whether I, as the skipper, bump the boat against the quay wall during harbor maneuvers and consequently damage the boat. Then the crew member doesn't have to say, why do I have to contribute? Or conversely, if a crew member now steps on the deck hatch and damages it, and that whole discussion simply then there's this charter deposit insurance, and then you have no discussion, out the door, fixed. It's important to understand Many charterers offer, for example, charter deposit insurances that often aren't actually real insurance policies, but are rather based on their own internal calculations.
You mean these waivers, as it's commonly referred to?
That's correct, the damage waivers.
Mhm,
These
mhm.
specific contractual agreements often contain inadmissible conditions, and the exclusions, such as for groundings, damage to the rudder or the dinghy, as well as scratches and scrapes, are also excluded, and outboard motors are not covered under these policies. Yeah, dear charter skippers, you really have to pay very close attention to what you are putting your signature on, because that's where trouble consistently comes from, which we hear about firsthand from our own experience. I just want to add that something very important at Yacht-Pool is the charter deposit insurance. There are absolutely no exclusions whatsoever. The yacht itself and all of the yacht equipment are also fully insured. If something gets stolen, the insurance is included. Yes, there is. You will never hear an excuse like that is not insured, this is not covered. Everything that is the boat, the yacht, and boating equipment is covered under the charter deposit insurance.
And because a lot of people are already asking, is that coverage per trip or is it per year? And I already know that with you guys, it's always on an annual basis.
That's one of the advantages, So many people are now wondering if I use an insurance for the deposit and then at the second or third charter, I might have a higher deposit requirement. Yacht-Pool makes that possible. You just give us a quick call, simply say, please increase my deposit starting from this date, from 2,000 to 3,000, for example, and it's handled quickly and easily. You will get the adjusted insurance premium sent to you, and only the difference in the premium amount is debited afterwards.
Yes, then of course I have. It's really bubbling in the chat area, Sami. I will try. Andreas, you asked now. So that's quite interesting. I'll display it on the screen briefly. Andreas wrote that in the charter contracts, it is often stated that the security deposit can be claimed for all damages, not just for those which were caused by fault. Basically, the situation that we need to have clarified is if, for example, a lightning strike and a severe storm were to cause significant damage to the boat, and the charter company then attempts to withhold the entire security deposit, arguing that the deposit covers all such incidents irrespective of any fault.
That means the electronic instruments on the boat are damaged. You as the skipper and your crew can't be blamed for that. That's what is meant by fault. But when such cases occur, that's where the deposit insurance comes into play. Where the charter company is now withholding the security deposit without proper justification, we will address that specific issue a bit later on. Then, of course, we will advise you, dear skipper, and thoroughly investigate what exactly transpired. What's the name of the charter company? Who did you book with? Is there a possibility for us to make a call there? Do we have a designated contact person with the charter company, and so on and so forth? I can tell you that given our extensive and well-proven track record, to put it plainly, I honestly don't know of a single skipper who has ever been left to personally cover the expenses, not a single time, by Yacht-Pool. But like I said, it naturally needs to be pursued. The important thing is it's a matter of principle that the deposit isn't withheld if there's no damage now.
So actually, it should actually be adhered to. And Rudiger actually writes exactly that. The deposit insurance pays out if the charter base doesn't return the deposit. Pays, that means something must be stuck somewhere. And now we're going to help you untie this knot. Yes, that's it. It's important for us to say it like that, yes, and to communicate that. And we have our direct possibilities to solve the case, yes. And there, where I then, Wolfgang is writing for the second time, Wolfgang, we haven't forgotten about you. That actually fits perfectly here now because it aligns exactly with the issue at hand. Because Wolfgang is writing that his deposit was actually deducted twice, or it was requested from him on 2 separate occasions. Specifically, he has 2 damages. And that's why the entire deposit was withheld twice. I haven't heard that one before either. We'll see later with the contract that the contract helps to keep these toxic clauses out of such agreements as much as possible. It should actually be the
deposit should be the maximum amount you can request from the charter customer. What's your take on that? That's precisely how it is. So thank you for asking, dear Volker. The thing is, you've got to be cautious. We always advise people to watch what they're signing, so pay attention to what he signs. And what we mean by that are these toxic clauses, which, when we include them in the charter agreement, normally a sound charter agreement would state, Dear skipper and crew, you are only liable up to the total amount of the deposit sum. For any material damage that he causes during a specific period, and that's the extent of it. And if, of course, there's a small additional clause written in that also covers damages exceeding the deposit amount, or rather a specific damage event, and you sign that, well, it's bad. Of course, it's bad because the contract, that is this.
I also noticed that in the contract you have, it clearly states, or rather strongly suggests, that the deposit sum is the absolute maximum amount they are actually legally allowed to deduct from you. And if a charter company doesn't have that clause in their contract, they could, of course, very easily claim they'll just take it twice. Exactly. And that's why it's really important to carefully review the charter contract as well.
We've already taken care of that particular aspect, and we'll be specifically going over YACHT-POOL's fair contract to ensure we prevent any such situations from ever arising.
Yes, I'm really happy you're all writing so diligently. It's truly a lot of fun for us. You see, Semi has an answer to every question. Helmut is now writing, for example, are Genaka or SUP also included when you go out? Because you said earlier that everything is included. Yes.
I say it again now, yacht and equipment are insured. Now you just have to say briefly, as long as it's a private trip, yes, it's of course all yacht and yacht equipment, including Genaka, is of course insured, yes. You have to look carefully in the charter contract, which insurance sum actually needs to be deposited, and to ensure the correct insurance sum if it's now a regatta trip, because the coverage can differ significantly depending on the type of activity. So then we naturally offer the solution. It's what we call this regatta deposit insurance. And there is, of course, this additional deposit, the regatta deposit, where the Genaka, if one is actually being used, can of course be included in the insurance coverage. But otherwise, if it's a private charter and you've got a Genaka included with it,
then it's included. That's what Helmut wanted to hear, and now he has to give you some praise, Sammy. In between some praise, super interesting webinar, so we'll keep trying to do it. That's really great feedback.
I hope to be able to answer the entire question.
So then I would say the charter deposit insurance is also important. That this deductible, which unfortunately has increased, you have noticed the prices have really gone up as well. Now it's not so flexible anymore. Splitting up the crew, yes. That means it already shows, and if you do 3 cruises per year, then the amount is basically paid just once annually, which is a huge advantage with you guys, yes, because it's really preferable if I know the payment is always calculated per individual cruise, right?
And you have full, comprehensive, and uninterrupted insurance coverage that protects you for the entire 12-month period without any breaks, gaps, or interruptions in your policy whatsoever.
So now I've got another question from Willis. He says, of course you were on the way and ended up stepping right through a window. Well, there was probably a party on board. That sort of thing can happen. Now the window is broken through. Would that be an example of a deposit insurance?
You've got that absolutely right there. That is insured.
I believe that costs 2,000 to 3,000 euros. There goes the deposit, and the deposit insurance would have covered that.
That's right.
Yes, and now I've got to say, Chris just handed me over the perfect question, Sammy. Now I've had small boats all year long with small deposits, and suddenly I'm seriously considering setting sail with a Bavaria 54, or maybe even a Grand Dufour up ahead on this journey. And of course, that will change the insurance amount. How quickly can one actually upgrade with you? What's the process like?
It can be handled informally through a phone call. We'll then proceed to adjust the contract and send the confirmation to you via email. It's important, if you realize just before arriving at the charter base that the security deposit is higher. Nowadays, it's possible to send a quick email to us before you arrive at the base, and when we are back in the office on Monday, then someone will retrospectively adjust and change the security deposit amount. It's always important to report the increase before you actually take possession.
So what that means is if I had completed the boat switch over on Saturday morning, then simply sending an email with a receipt stamp to you would be entirely sufficient to get it activated. because on the weekends you always get that feeling until everything is sorted, but you're not underinsured, so you can go on vacation feeling quite peaceful. You could see it that way.
Important to recognize that in advance, of course, and it's correct then to just send us a simple mail form.
Yeah, great. So, dear Martina, I haven't forgotten you. Now it's your turn, because Martina has been texting me,
I think as an Italian, I can get a skipper's license with you folks, but even if you're completely sure, of course, we'd naturally always prefer Martina anytime. We offer charter insurance all across Europe. All the insurance, how we operate, can be a topic. No problem whatsoever. Just get in touch, just contact us. You'll get the insurance, yes. And we should also briefly overlay Dina as well. We'll get to that.
When it comes to trainings, I'm already entering the commercial sector. We have a separate slide for that, and we'll go into that in much more detail later. Yes.
We'll get to that. Yes, exactly.
All right, we have now covered that with the action, but I think it was truly crucial. And the next thing we need to cover is, and here we ourselves also have training at Blue 2, where the focus is always on when I have problems, when I send a mayday, a ban, what exactly is this accident insurance then? And actually it's referred to as the accident and recovery cost insurance for you guys. Is that correct?
That's right. The skipper accident insurance policy is, for us here at YACHT-POOL, considered the second most important charter insurance that a skipper should absolutely have in place for both himself personally and for his entire crew. I'll just briefly explain why. The skipper's accident insurance covers disability, rescue costs, and death, providing absolutely essential protection for everyone involved. And exactly that is why, when the skipper have a private accident insurance, the same scenario as before applies again and again. They generally rule out sports that involve a risk of injury, and sailing, unfortunately, is one of them which has a risk of injury. So 99% of the time, it's excluded. Even if you have confirmation from your private accident insurance that it is indeed included, you absolutely must inquire about the specific coverage amount. For instance, with rescue costs, it is completely useless if your private accident insurance only covers a minimal sum, like just €1,000 for rescue costs. With us, rescue costs are covered up to 60,000. It doesn't happen that often, but we have had cases where a helicopter costed around 15,000 euros per hour. Yeah, and that can get very expensive. So the difference between skipper liability insurance and skipper accident insurance, we say here at our company, is that what you don't get paid out from the skipper liability insurance with your right pocket. That's what the skipper's accident insurance pays for. And that's the reason I'm explaining it. The skipper's liability insurance will only pay out if negligence can be proven. The skipper's accident insurance pays out regardless of fault. For example, if I do a jibe as the skipper and unfortunately the boom hits a crew member on the head, these are unfortunately the kinds of situations it is the skipper's accident insurance that covers it that keep on occurring. Now, is this a typical scenario for the skipper's liability insurance? Due to the maneuver performed by the skipper, a crew member ended up getting injured. So there we are, all out on the water, underway, and we're just sitting there when suddenly the crew member develops some serious chest pains and we're a long way from shore, so we have to react immediately and send out a mayday signal. Eventually, a rescue boat arrives on the scene to provide assistance. So no one's really at fault here, not the skipper himself and not the crew members either. That's precisely why skipper's accident insurance is so essential. The critical point here, and unfortunately this is standard in liability insurance terms, is that family members are explicitly excluded from coverage. That's why in accident insurance, it's not an issue whatsoever. Family members are covered. In this case involving the patent jeep, if a crew member who is a family member of the skipper gets struck by the boom, they are unfortunately not covered under the skipper's liability insurance. Even if it's the skipper's fault, because the crew member is a family member, and that is exactly why having skipper accident insurance is so essential.
And perhaps another important point is that I always get questions during our courses as well. Now I am a skipper. I've now completed this particular skipper accident insurance. This does apply, as far as I'm aware, to the entire crew, meaning every single member.
Absolutely correct, exactly. The skipper is insured and the crew is automatically co-insured.
Yes, great. And now I see the recovery costs, which always serves as a very clear reminder to me that something's happening, and so the crew needs to be rescued from it. And you did say earlier, helicopter hour 10, 12, 13,000 per hour, and so on. That means the recovery costs would be counted into that calculation. So the entire crew would be recovered from a safety island or wherever, or from the ship, and that would be included there.
The important thing is it doesn't necessarily have to lead to a life-threatening situation, so to speak. It's enough if, for example, you see as a skipper an unexpected storm, you see the risk and send a mayday call. Then, of course, that's covered by the skipper's accident insurance, which includes the rescue costs.
Yeah, Tina's asking, but I think you already answered that anyway. With the accident insurance, family members are allowed to be part of the crew too. That's how I understood it.
So regarding the accident insurance, it really doesn't matter whether the crew members are family or just friends, are also covered even if it is not by fault. The sole distinction actually lies between the skipper's liability coverage and those specific situations where fault is clearly demonstrated, and particularly when the injured party is indeed a crew member. For example, if it's a family member of the skipper, it is unfortunately excluded according to the general terms and conditions of the liability insurance. So in that case, as we said, if the liability insurance from the right pocket doesn't pay out, then the accident insurance from the left pocket will actually step in and cover the costs.
Yes, and Joseph,
It doesn't matter whether there's an insurer behind it, it's irrelevant here, or whether it's paid by liability or by comprehensive insurance.
Joseph is asking, when does the insurance coverage from the yacht pool actually begin? Is it when I step on the boat or when I walk out my front door at home and commence the car journey there?
It's here. Of course it is.
All the charter insurances we're offering actually kicks in the moment you step onto the boat. Exactly. So before that, the private accident insurance that each of us already has in place would apply, since I'm traveling with my car and family. So with you guys, I would have understood it the same way, that it only starts when you actually get on the boat and not a moment sooner. Yes, exactly.
Only one insurance comes into play there. We'll come back to that later, which covers you from now until one day after the charter ends. That would be the charter cancellation insurance, and it's all about the valid cancellation reasons, but we will get to that again in a bit. Yes. And Andreas, he also has a question. It sounds kind of funny at first glance. It applies to immediate family or cousins. Where does that line get drawn? That must be clearly defined somewhere what actually counts as family-related matters. That is, of course, what is meant. What all are included in shared living arrangements? And parents, but cousins and such are not insured if they do not all actually live together in the exact same household, then they are not covered under the policy at all.
So they don't really count as family. Let's just put it that way.
They don't really count as actual family members, you know.
Yeah, and Iki wrote that. Maybe I can answer that too, since I'm doing training as well. If I have to send out a rescue team because there's a danger to life and limb, I'm the one who has to pay for it. Helicopter rescue boat. At that point, I can only say this much, Semi. You can correct me if I'm wrong. When I dispatch a medic, that signifies the highest danger level. It's the most urgent emergency call I can possibly have. That's for a heart attack. A life is in immediate danger. If the engine fails and I might not be maneuverable, that's not a mayday, that's a ban, and then the priority is always that life comes first, absolutely. Then nobody asks if costs will be incurred if I can save a human life, and then, for instance, a helicopter might come, a boat might come. In general, I don't know beforehand whether it will cause costs or not. We once had such a case on island Korkula where a person was flown by helicopter to the hospital in Split for urgent medical treatment with the whole entire works and all, and a bill never arrived. But this isn't a case where I'd say a bill never comes in. I've actually heard of other instances as well where they essentially made a mayday because something on board wasn't working correctly. So no emergency call was issued at all. And of course, the rescue team said, you have to pay for this because this doesn't qualify as a mayday. That would have been classified at best as a security or a ship-to-ship operation, meaning That's also the kind of call out for us at the fire department that essentially would not have been considered necessary at all. I could end up with the costs. That's why you can't handle this so easily, except Sammy, you've had other experiences.
No, you've answered that absolutely correctly. The skipper accident insurance now only applies to the people. So it's not about salvage operations and all that. It's really just purely and only about genuine emergency situations.
A heart attack, for example, would also be an example.
For someone who has been seriously injured, for example, and so on and so forth, where there is an emergency requiring that person to be transported, say by a rescue boat and so on and so forth, that's what this skipper accident insurance is intended for.
Yes, and I would say now that we've already been talking about heart attacks and all that, Sammy, I do believe the next slide fits quite well now. And this is a product that you'd like to introduce. Everyone is welcome to scan the QR code, which will take you directly to the page where everything is fully explained. Yeah, but Sammy will now address that point.
So in short, that has nothing to do with insurance now. It's just a new product that I personally think is great and that I use personally in my private life too. That's this service called Teledoc. It's really just about getting the app installed, and then you can get in touch with the doctor right away, immediately, without any delay. And you can immediately get in touch with a doctor right there on the spot without having to wait for an appointment or travel anywhere for a consultation, which is incredibly convenient and saves you a tremendous amount of time and hassle. You need a doctor, and instead of having to make the journey to a medical practice, you can consult a physician directly, immediately, and conveniently through this app using a live video call. You can check it out. You can even get a prescription issued right away. It covers everything from a finger injury where the bleeding won't stop, all the way to a heart attack, everything that could possibly happen. I think the product is really great. It covers the skipper and their crew. They're all insured together, and the advantage is also that it applies even when you're not traveling on the water, and even when you're in the mountains, you can make use of it. You can get the information by scanning the QR code, and it's in a good, easily accessible format at no cost.
29.90 is actually under 30 euros for the whole year. I find it manageable and it's a great product. Yeah, great. I've had a situation like that myself before where I was at the side of the road and as a helper, I didn't know what to do. And that's where I think it's very valuable when a medic on the other end explains a few things to you, tells you what to do, and calms you down. Because as a helper, you basically don't know what you should do in that kind of situation. And that's, of course, a great offer to avoid a bit of stress and, most importantly, to avoid making any mistakes. Now I've already promised Robert the Volpini once again because he's really pressing me for an answer one more time.
Now, accidents also acute illnesses, so acute illness that could now be fainting, heart attack, all sorts of things. Maybe you could briefly repeat that. Of course, everything you encounter on site. So when it comes to that, like an acute illness, the question is, of course, whether it's necessary to be transported now. So there's the accident, stab wound, stab vest, and allergy. That could be something acute like that. And that is, of course, already sufficiently covered by that. So once more, there are three things that are covered by the skipper accident insurance. Invalidity, which can be extremely important in the event of a serious accident occurring. A father who is injured and may not be able to work with a family and children to support, that's a crucial point to consider. Secondly, workers' compensation. It's important, and God forbid, in case of a death, there is a specific sum insured that
probably refers to the literature's follow-up costs, which can run into the millions. Probably, yes.
That's it, exactly.
All right. I'll fade that out again. Now we're getting to the skipper's legal protection insurance, and we do have that. Probably each of you has your own legal protection insurance as well, and that would then be sort of secondary. If your own doesn't apply, you can certainly say something about that.
Yeah, skipper legal protection, let's put it this way. If you have skipper liability insurance or skipper accident insurance and there's a liability or accident claim, you don't need skipper legal protection because we represent you anyway. We'll represent you through the existing skipper liability or skipper accident insurance, depending on which case applies. but we always recommend getting the skipper legal protection insurance in addition for anything that might involve the authorities, just to be on the safe side. Time and again, there are cases where even when you have been back home for quite a significant amount of time, you get sued, for example, for environmental pollution or for not having respected the proper distance from the shoreline. The fine that they impose is a complete and utter joke. It's ridiculous. But in some countries like Greece, for example, simply paying the fine alone isn't sufficient enough. Sometimes you have to actually show up in court with a witness, meaning you've got to bring a crew member along with a lawyer to the actual court hearing. For example, a court case in Athens, then you can imagine all the expenses involved: flight costs, court fees, attorney fees, what the total costs will amount to. And such cases are indeed covered by the skipper's legal expenses insurance policy for these kinds of incidents. It doesn't cover disputes with the charter company. I have to mention that right now that is specifically excluded. Otherwise, we have certain cases where this applies. For example, on the next slide here. This here, what you see, looks quite unusual, or in fact rather catastrophic indeed, to be honest. The topic here is the anchor chain that broke. You have to say here, this is a very experienced skipper whom the charter company knew for years, and they had complete trust in the skipper's abilities. It's a situation where the equipment failed despite the operator's proven track record and the company's long-standing confidence in him. By the way, they quickly provided him with a replacement boat. But the real point of contention here is that the authorities are holding the skipper liable for having endangered the charter sailors on board. And here is the case, which went on for years under his skipper's legal insurance. Ultimately, in the second instance, he was fully acquitted, a major legal victory for him. So, not many cases come up, but when problems do arise concerning the skipper's legal protection, it can be very expensive. And we're talking about a premium of just 28 euros and a few cents for the entire 12 months. The real question is whether it's even worth having this discussion at all. That's something I would have available as well, because it is also important whether the private legal insurance covers international disputes or not, whether they know what they are doing or not, and if they are actually competent in that specific areas. And that's why we have our specialists, you could say, now throughout Europe. We have contacts with lawyers in every country, and we can cover ourselves there.
Yes. So legal protection means like with a normal legal protection insurance that you have yourself. That the legal protection insurance essentially steps in to defend you and argue your case against the accusations that have been made, and actively work to build and then proceed to implement a comprehensive defense strategy against those specific legal allegations that have been formally presented in this particular scenario involving the skipper. To provide legal support for that somehow in court, or does it say, no, that's a criminal offense? Then we don't take any further action regarding the matter. We just leave it completely as it is.
No, it varies from case to case. In that case, they would, of course, be accused of being a skipper. So it's always just basically kind of a whatever situation. A typical case would be the skipper legal insurance for that, right?
Yeah, and Arnold asks, does the legal insurance also cover disputes about the charter contract? I don't know, Dr. Arnold. If you signed it exactly as Semi told you, then you've effectively already agreed to its terms. That's when it gets tricky, because you did provide a signature, but beforehand someone could just ask you guys, then I don't need legal insurance. Do I, Semi?
Unfortunately, the legal protection doesn't cover disputes regarding the charter contract, or, for example, if the boat was handed over in poor condition and so on and so forth. Believe us, with an annual premium of just 300 euros, you simply will not get by. Yes.
I can imagine that. So, Arnold, I can only give you this one piece of advice. When it comes to those charter contracts, I've experienced a great deal myself. You get them sent to you in advance. You can look at them very carefully. You should really look at them very carefully. There are also some things in there. You must not run out with wind force 6, Beaufort scale. Thank you very much. It's very important to be aware of that. Before the wind blows, then I must not leave. But it would also mean that if I know that this evening it's going to 6 Beaufort and more, I would also not be allowed to leave beforehand, even though there is less wind in the marina. So you really have to read this very carefully. And we also have this contract from you, which of course now both sides, you have to say the contract is not only for the person who charters it, but also for the charter company. Both should be satisfied. Yes, but we'll take a look at that later. Exactly.
That obviously needs to be investigated further. And regarding the contract, that would now be the solution to avoid disputes with the charter company.
Yes, we've run a bit over time now, but I think as long as people stay engaged and it remains interesting, they'll forgive us for going a little over time. And I think then we'll look at the next slide, the one about consequential damage. You can tell us a bit about that right away.
Exactly. YACHT-POOL offers the extended consequential damage insurance. Of course, the entire insurance is useful, where we have to tell you that, of course, the consequential damage is included within the skipper's liability insurance. Only the main problem is that it's solely the legal minimum part that is included. And unfortunately, that specific legal standard differs significantly from one country to another. What that fundamentally means is that if, for example, a specific clause is included within the charter contract, that you, dear skipper, are held liable for each hour of delay, amounting to 10% of the follow-on charter fee, right? And the one you signed, then the statutory agreement is no longer applicable, and it becomes a private arrangement that exists exclusively between you, dear skipper, and the charterer involved in this specific case. Therefore, the extended charter consequential insurance is important. It doesn't just cover material damage you're responsible for on the chartered yacht when repairs cannot be completed promptly, and the company also provides this particular type of coverage as well. This is particularly important in the event of a delayed return, whether it's caused by bad weather or from an accident, such as a crew member getting injured and preventing the boat's timely return, or because the crew falls ill. In these situations, the charterer has the right at any moment to claim compensation from the skipper for the subsequent charter that is impacted by the delayed return. So I'm just giving you this as a specific example here. Drawing from my own personal observation and having been with YACHT-POOL for more than 11 years now, I can honestly say that the charter consequential damage insurance has been claimed upon much more frequently in recent periods, particularly over the past few years. We're also noticing that trend in our loss statistics. And that's precisely why it's so crucial to have this coverage. I'm not going to compare it now with the charter deposit insurance because it can actually be more expensive than losing a security deposit where, for example, you'd lose a 3,000 euro deposit right now. We also had an example last year that was new for us as well at YACHT-POOL, a specific situation where we really learned something valuable from it. Skipper was traveling in Croatia when he got a call concerning a private family matter and had to turn around and head back home immediately without any delay. He calls us on his way back from the car and called YACHT-POOL. That's when I was on the phone with my good luck, right then. So did he actually state that it's true I left the boat docked at an arena with the entire crew still on board there? The crew is not authorized to continue operating the boat. I unfortunately have to get back home as quickly as possible. So what do we do then? And then I said, okay, when did you actually have to have the boat back? The next morning, I actually had to head back and make sure the boat was returned by midday. That was the arrangement. And of course, we thought about it and called up the charter company and let them know about the situation, and the charter company, of course, told us, well, what can be done here? You just have to find a solution. So then we asked them, could you perhaps arrange for a skipper, a commercial skipper, meaning a hired skipper, who can bring the boat back? It was a truly fantastic story, and the charter company actually sent a skipper who brought the boat back and right on schedule. And we received a bill for 1,200 euros, which was a manageable amount. Even though no further damage had occurred after the initial incident, we still decided to process and cover the entire claim through the extended charter consequential loss insurance policy. This is not a skipper's liability case, again, and also not deposit case. The boat is intact. The issue is solely that the boat wasn't returned late, and that's precisely why the charter's consequential loss insurance took care of it.
Yes, that happens quite quickly, but you really have to be prepared when the bad weather comes along. The IKE had already written earlier on, I had to leave the bay, even though it was clearly stated in the charter contract That night voyages are strictly forbidden. He had to leave for whatever reason, then you're basically operating outside the law without any rules. So if I do something, even if I have to leave, you often can't get back to the harbor because the weather turns so bad. That means I might risk damage to the vessel itself because I'm heading back home in severe weather conditions, or I end up facing additional charges and have to explain I'll be a day late because the driver encountered a problem, the crew waiting right there on the dock for the ship, you know? That's just how it is.
Well, exactly. That's just how it is. I mean, as I said, there are always these cases. It's prepared or planned to bring the boat back the following day. And then the harbor master comes along and says, you are not allowed to leave the marina because, as you said, there are winds over 8 Beaufort outside. Then you have to respect that. Otherwise, it's grossly negligent to leave the marina, and that can lead to delays in returning the boat. And therefore, with the extended charter, consequential damage insurance due to bad weather is also included.
Yes, a little tip from us as a training facility. Such strong weather phenomena where an alert has been issued, they most often don't occur instantly. So with good tools like Windy, you can get these things under control even 3 days beforehand and basically manage them with weather routing. So that's just like a little tip on the side. Then I'd say, if you're all set and ready to go, we'll proceed and move on to the cancellation insurance.
Cancellation insurance, charter cancellation insurance, specialized for charter customers. You have to mention that because it covers not only the skipper's cancellation, it also covers the cancellation of the crew members. Essentially, it's the case that as soon as the skipper and his crew have signed the charter contract and made the first deposit, they are immediately at risk, meaning they are financially liable from that very moment onward without any protection. Therefore, we don't have specific deadlines, but we recommend that if you plan on taking out charter cancellation insurance anyway, you should do so promptly after signing the charter contract, because the insurance coverage starts immediately from the day you send us the application all the way until 1 day after the turn-in. So what is actually covered by the insurance policy now? This includes instances of illness, accident, death, property damage, adverse reactions to vaccinations, and in the same way, all crew members are fully covered under this policy if the skipper is missing. The entire tour can be cancelled, the insured sum will be refunded. In the event that a crew member who is a relative of the skipper, specifically a family member, is missing, then the entire tour can once again be cancelled. Should it happen that a crew member who is not related to the skipper is unavailable, then a partial refund will naturally be issued. The charter cancellation insurance is of course extremely important as it covers this specific risk. So there are no disputes, and in most cases, a crew member always backs out at the last minute, things like that. To avoid this kind of discussion, we recommend the charter cancellation insurance. If you're planning to fly out to your charter destination, we'd really strongly recommend that you also insure your flight costs or the hotel expenses, because among other things, if a tour gets cancelled, then for insured flight costs, the flight costs will also be refunded, and likewise, the hotel costs will also be refunded. The cancellation of the tour is also covered by the charter cancellation insurance. This means that in any case where a crew member or the skipper has to fly home immediately due to an emergency situation, the associated flight costs are also covered by the policy. Then the emergency flight, which the skipper or the crew member had booked, will also be fully reimbursed as part of the policy's coverage. There are always questions about the charter cancellation insurance. Specific questions, for example, we are 5 buddies and we want, no matter who has to drop out, that the trip doesn't happen. All these suggestions and inquiries are absolutely feasible, but you simply need to inform us beforehand. We can then supplement your policy with a special agreement to ensure there are absolutely no coverage gaps whatsoever. Precisely, what's absolutely crucial, my dear skipper and your crew, is that you must remain vigilant. There is a very common and dangerous misconception that one is automatically insured through their credit card or their personal travel cancellation policy. but this coverage is very often and most of the time insufficient or non-existent. Unfortunately, that's simply not the case. It's only the package tours that are insured and not when you charter a boat. That's unfortunately not covered at all. So I'll just give a quick example. The crew member tells their credit card company or private cancellation insurance, "I'm not going now because the skipper dropped out." Unfortunately, it's rejected. That's why we recommend the charter cancellation insurance from us, YACHT-POOL, because it is actually specialized specifically in charter cruise.
I need an overview because the questions keep jumping around, Sammy, so we often have to jump back.
That's very nice, dear Michelle, to have so many questions.
So, for example, Paul writes, what happens if I cause damage to the boat and it's not available for the next crew? And in which cases or countries does the skipper's main liability cover that? So I believe that skipper's liability is the appropriate insurance.
It depends on the country. Initially, they'll examine what was actually signed, what's stated in the charter agreement, and depending on whether or not there are now recourse claims coming from the charterers. That is currently being checked to ensure that no gaps arise. That is precisely what the skipper's liability insurance is designed for. And believe me, in about 98% of all charter contracts, this specific clause is already included, and it makes it explicitly clear that you are liable for consequential damages. And if that's in there, as already mentioned, then it's a private arrangement, then it's definitely not covered by the skipper's liability insurance. And therefore,
so then I need the consequential damage insurance.
There's no question about it. If the skipper's liability insurance doesn't cover the claim, 98% of the time, the extended consequential damage policy will handle it.
Yes, and I hope, Paul, that explanation was perfectly clear and understandable for you. And you yourself had written that the consequential damage insurance would be the correct one. So Bernd is now asking, what if the boat isn't actually present there on site, so that the trip simply can't be started? Then I believe the charter company must be held liable. I know that the conditions often state quite clearly, if the boat isn't ready by 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., then it's considered a major contractual breach, or whatever the specific terms of the agreement explicitly stipulate in that situation. I think that's individual, isn't it?
That's right, it's individual. It depends on the conditions. Of course, it might be that the boat won't be handed over on time now at 1 or at 2. The charter company always has a bit of flexibility, usually around 1 to 3 hours. But if the boat is genuinely not available, then the charter company is definitely expected to make a real effort to find a suitable replacement boat. It's fundamentally about maintaining thorough and proactive communication with all parties at every single step of the process to ensure complete clarity and mutual understanding, which is absolutely essential for preventing misunderstandings and for facilitating a smooth and cooperative resolution for everyone involved in the situation right from the very beginning.
Yes, I also pay by credit card because then the entire trip is insured. And I believe that's a misconception because it's actually a tour. You can't really call it a package holiday, right?
That's definitely how it is. I have to say, it's quite funny actually. I myself was caught out by that right at the very beginning of the Corona period when a sailing trip was planned. And I genuinely thought to myself that through the private cancellation insurance, it's handled, it was rejected. Luckily, it was the beginning of the Corona period, so they naturally canceled all the trips then. Yes.
But in that situation, we all learned the difference between a package holiday and an individual trip. Yes, just like that. And now I have a ton of questions like how much does it cost? What's the price? I'd say right at the very end, we've actually got a QR code where you'll then be able to access a page. You don't have to buy anything there, but all the prices are listed. It would just take too long to go through all the prices in this speech. I can only say one thing, but all of the prices are genuinely quite moderate indeed. All right, then we have the fly and sail next.
Exactly. Just to quickly explain this, we have it as a service. Of course, now it's not an insurance. Fly and Sail provides assistance, specializing in charter clients. When he flies out to your charter destination, we recommend booking the flights through Fly and Sail. You have quite a few advantages with that service. They are specialists in handling charter clients, and even if the crew is arriving from various locations, they are able to coordinate it so that you all end up arriving pretty much at the same time. There's also a cancellation option available. For favorable terms and conditions, just give them a call to get some professional advice from their team. You can, of course, have a free and completely non-binding quote sent directly to you. This also relates directly to my role at YACHT-POOL as a specialist handling cancellations. I have to say this, a lot of our customers use the fly and sail service, and when they take out a charter cancellation insurance with us, they naturally insure their flights along with it. And if you actually have to cancel, then you're dealing with an insurance provider rather than the tour operator. That means we at Fly and Sail will take care of contacting them and we'll organize the flight cancellation. And you, dear skipper, don't have to do anything. Just send over the documents. We'll take care of the whole thing.
Yes, awesome. So I think it's a great service, and we also have a QR code for you. Go ahead and try it out, and it will take you directly to the page that describes the fly and sail service. And that gives you this combined advantage, so to speak, which is really quite useful in practice.
That's exactly it.
That's exactly it. Thanks for the service.
You're very welcome. And now let's go ahead and proceed to take a look at the next slide.
It's always about, now there's some damage. I've had it happen before. Now there's a little scratch on my boat's exterior surface. You know how it is, a small gel coat scratch. Then I have to report it to the charter company as I'm obligated to do so. Probably I don't even have to report it. When the charterer comes to inspect the boat, he'll just say that scratch wasn't there before. That's why the recommendation is, when you take over the boat, you really should properly document any scratches like that right from the very beginning itself. Or you take your phone and just film everything once so that scratches that were already there don't end up being your fault. But basically, that's something I handle directly with the charterer, right?
That's right, exactly. Report it directly to the charterer when reporting the damage. It also depends on what happened. If it's just a small scratch, for example, okay, you should still report it, of course. However, but if there's a gap, if something's damaged, you should report it promptly so the charterer naturally has enough time, perhaps to find a replacement depending on what happened. Reporting damage to us is very simple, very easy. We have several different options available for you to use. Either you just give us a quick call and we'll immediately send you a damage confirmation and a list of the documents we need via email, so that when you're back home, alternatively, you can find all the precise information on our website, depending on the specific type of claim, be it liability insurance, cancellation, or a security deposit, for example. So here's exactly what you need to do. We are available for you all week long, from 9 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. Should there be any urgent case, we of course have a mobile number listed on our website that you can use for any emergency situations that may arise unexpectedly at any time. Of course, you can use it. By emergencies, we're specifically referring to situations where it's genuinely, or if there's a personal injury or the ship is actually sinking, then that's when you should call this number. Otherwise, don't make a call, not for an incident such as a lost anchor.
Great. Now I have an interesting question from Johannes. It's a bit much, but I'll try. If the scratch now happens while departing from the neighboring boat, liability insurance would definitely come into play for me. Do I need to call the harbor master, or is it sufficient to just fill out an accident report with the other skipper? What would you say about that?
Definitely call the harbor master, get in touch with him and make sure to have an official damage report drawn up. I know it's not always easy when harbor masters refuse to do that for you. Nowadays, you've always got a few tricks up your sleeve. For instance, you can simply pull out your phone and shoot a quick video of the person involved. Are you not formally creating a harbor protocol right then? That often speeds things up. Alternatively, if that doesn't work, the crucial step is to contact the charter company directly, obtain the necessary information, and have him send a confirmation, be it a WhatsApp message or an email, stating that a harbor protocol is unnecessary. But it makes you wonder, why is there even a requirement for a harbor protocol in the first place? Necessary is, or why? Because some liability insurance from the charter companies, if there is no harbor protocol, will reject the claim. And unfortunately, it's also the case that the skipper's liability insurance, because without a harbor protocol, they will also reject the claim. To protect yourselves, you should always get a harbor protocol for liability claim incidents. I know here comes the next question, which is, can a liability claim happen outside the marina? We're currently outside the marina. Then you'll need to pilot the vessel to the nearest marina and obtain a harbor log from there. That's important. Except, as I said, if you have a written confirmation in the form of an email or WhatsApp from the charter company stating that it's not necessary.
So then I can hide that again? So now there are, of course, a few questions about the fair contract, Sammy, but that's still to come. That means a little patience. We'll get to the contract soon. Yes. Good, Sammy. Now comes the part that I can pretty much also say from our training facility. Am I insured when I am commercially active? Commercial activity, you can perhaps help us with that. At what point does a commercial activity actually begin? Of course, I can't just take the cheap skipper's liability insurance for hobby skippers and then go out doing training for 12, 15 weeks a year. Perhaps you could explain a bit.
Of course not. So the thing is, the gray area really begins as soon as it involves any form of monetary value, for instance, when his charter fees are paid by the crew members themselves or his flight costs are completely covered by them entirely. That's precisely where the gray area lies. You all know that the fund stops as soon as more money enters the picture. I'm just giving an example. To understand this, imagine a crew member gets injured and liability claims are made against the boat's insurance, which then denies the claim because, for instance, personal injury coverage is specifically excluded from the policy. Then the poor crew member has no other option but to take legal action against the skipper. And then here, the insurance company will, of course, document the damage in more detail and will naturally ask, how was the maneuver planned? Was it a hired skipper or not? And it's very straightforward for the insurance company to deny the claim if it was a private skipper's primary responsibility that was booked. Therefore, our goal is not to make a few extra euros now. It's about ensuring long-term trust and sustainability. You know far better than I do which specific category you currently fall into, whether it involves monetary benefits or not. We have the solution ready, so please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And here, of course, we've got a great solution for anyone who is only dealing with monetary benefits. And there's, of course, as you said earlier, dear Michael, one or the other person who's traveling as a real professional skipper for 12 weeks or 20 weeks a year. And of course, there is the real professional skipper insurance, which we are also in a position to offer.
Yeah. That makes total sense to me. When you're a professional doing several weeks of training annually, a standard insurance policy just isn't sufficient to cover it. And regarding the gray area, if you get an offer from a semi-pro team, please make sure to ask if I fall into that gray area or not. And it's actually quite good to clarify that beforehand, before a transfer. Everything else now falls under commercial activity, which is very clearly defined for training facilities. But this gray area can definitely lead to discussions. A lot of people have said, well, it's all private anyway. But I don't pay anything for the daycare because I'm working, you understand? And that's when I'm actually already in this gray area.
As I said, there are options. Simply please contact us. We'd be happy to advise you further.
Yes, and now we have an interesting topic. I need to elaborate a bit now. I'm always hearing things and keeping an eye on social media, and there are usually these common sayings circulating, like if I have the Croatian coastal patent, then the company YACHT-POOL and also other insurers will immediately reject the application. And we said, the two of us should talk about it beforehand. It's possible. Of course, a certificate is important, but first and foremost, it's about me having to prove my ability. That means the insurance company might turn to me and say, dear Michael, now you've got to prove that you're capable of planning a trip, steering a ship, rigging it up and sailing it. So a certificate certainly helps, of course, in the assessment of that person, but you will probably also see it that way, hopefully, that the Croatian coastal license is not a reason for exclusion.
That's right. So what's always important is solid training. That's the be-all and end-all. We naturally get lots of questions all the time about the Croatian coastal license. I just always give a short example. There are these long-time skippers the super skippers with the Croatian coastal license, and unfortunately, they're not allowed to sail in a few areas, while the other guy who just got his license is allowed to sail there.
It's about the training.
It's definitely about the training. And among other places, they're in very good hands with you there.
Yes, thanks for the promotion here. And it's like this, of course, the certificate shouldn't be the focus of the training, but rather the knowledge of when do I go out, when do I not go out, how can I assess situations? And I believe that's what makes a good training facility.
Exactly, that's precisely what it's about.
Yeah, I can say that too. I'm actually a proud owner of the Checked and Trusted this year. And you can maybe briefly touch on what Checked and Trusted is. What makes me particularly happy, of course, is that since last year, training institutions have also been able to receive your Checked and Trusted quality certification. And I saw that, well, I'm actually among the top 3. There's the Yacht Club Austria, which is basically the best training center with over 2,000, 3,000 customers is there, it's included, and Bluetooth also received this certification. We're of course particularly happy about that. All right, so check and rate, that's a very important point for the skippers, and that's precisely what it's all about.
Our webinar at the beginning, and a lot of questions are coming through now about check and rest was how to behave, how do I become safe? Signing a contract with a partner, things like that. Check Contrast will just briefly touch upon that particular point. For many years now, YACHT-POOL has consistently been conducting checks on the creditworthiness and payment reliability of both agencies and charter companies. An email is always sent out at the end of each year where companies are asked to confidentially lay their financial figures and creditworthiness on the table for our internal review and assessment process. And these companies are then checked and trusted by us following a thorough review and are subsequently listed on our website. Agencies and charter companies, we vouch for these companies, and through that, we can offer the charter skipper the security of charter price protection, thereby ensuring their entire financial investment is fully safeguarded and protected from any potential losses, can be fully secured. There's really no need for me to elaborate on that nowadays. You can clearly see what the global situation is like, and on top of that, there are so many instances of insolvency or other tricky situations arising these days. We always hear about charter skippers standing right there on the dock with their entire crew, and yet the vessel simply isn't prepared for departure at all because the payment hadn't come through yet, or the company had already gone completely and utterly bankrupt. And through this service, you can check out our website's comprehensive list of agencies and charter companies, which, as I mentioned, are all listed with us. Find an agency that's listed with us, one that's a perfect match for your specific requirements and fits exactly what you're looking for on the ground there in your specific local geographic area, and that is officially registered with us. This agency will then refer you to a charter company that is in turn also listed with YACHT-POOL. So it's like a close-knit network and everyone knows each other. You have the advantage that he can secure the charter price protection. First and second, we know the companies quite well. And in case there's an issue or something comes up, you can always talk to the people reasonably, whether they're agencies or charter companies. And I can only confirm that through the damages we have, for example, if we know the company, then sometimes a phone call is all it takes and it's sorted. And that's precisely why it is so important to book with those companies that check and trust YACHT-POOL. Go and have a look at the website.
Absolutely, you can. In fact, we've just recently awarded the certification to a sailing school, which clearly demonstrates that our vetting process is comprehensive and also applies to the service providers themselves, such as the sailing schools.
Quality of the sailing school, the training methods, and so on. Yes, exactly. These are actually cases we've had in the past where YACHT-POOL was also involved, specifically the Blue Balu case, as an example. Maybe another term for you, where a company actually went bankrupt and the customers who were insured with us, they actually got their money fully refunded in the end, got it all back. A completely new case from just last year. The company, it's a strong online agency platform where, unfortunately, many customers got taken in, essentially lured in because of this particular pricing strategy they had going on specifically for these price dumping, which is really the key issue at the heart of this whole situation, which normally cost 3,000 euros per week at the standard rate were being offered for just 2,000 euros. And unfortunately, the customer, the charter skipper, got caught up in it and booked the deal. And eventually, the company actually went bankrupt. I should clarify that the company Zizou actually initiated contact with YACHT-POOL several years back, and they have consistently remained on our blacklist since the very beginning. So we always recommend, before you book, check the list on our site. Anyone who's listed and trusted with us, you can book with them blind, no problem. And otherwise, we are happy to be available, because if questions come up, we are also happy to advise you.
Yes, then I'd say we still have 2 slides left, so it doesn't take too long if we go a little bit faster now. Important is the fair charter. I can already tell you we've gotten questions. What's the difference between the fair charter and a regular charter contract? And I think you know that very well.
Exactly. So the fair contract from YACHT-POOL is something we've had for over 12 years now, and a great many charter companies and agencies make use of it. It's specifically structured to offer benefits and advantages to the charterer, the person renting out the boat, and also to the agencies involved in the entire process. The terms are very simply written, so there aren't any tricky clauses in there where you, as a charter skipper or agency or charter company, just blindly sign it and can be sure that everything is regulated and there are no tricks. That doesn't mean if you've now signed a charter contract that you don't need charter insurance. No. But for that, for example, like in our previous webinar, it's still essential to have that coverage in place to protect yourself from any unforeseen circumstances that might arise. A charter deposit insurance, so that someone who has contacted us now pays the deposit in a single trip twice, have been claimed because 2 damages occurred. Such toxic clauses will definitely not be included in the fair charter contract. That's for absolutely certain.
And in that case, I can assume that if I know a charterer has your fair contract, that, well, those toxic clauses have already been diffused. You could put it that way.
And relax, sign your charter contract. This is a really positive development for everyone involved, because it ensures a fair and standardized agreement. This new fair contract is designed to benefit and protect all parties in the transaction, which is a huge step forward for the entire charter industry. It brings much needed clarity and security, reducing potential disputes and creating a more reliable framework for both charterers and yacht owners. The collaboration between these major organizations guarantees that the fair contract has been thoroughly vetted and incorporates best practices, making it a trusted document you can rely on for a smooth and secure chartering experience, which they found at YACHT-POOL and have now agreed with us that they will adopt it from us, and it is very likely. It looks like that it will actually be pushed through by 2026, which means this standard contract will become widely accepted across the industry. Currently, the contract is still being managed by YACHT-POOL, but it is fully anticipated to be taken over by the European boating industry in Brussels.
Oder ICOMIA International L, yeah. So that's the good news, and you can of course read through this fair contract on the homepage. Then you'll see right away what's all included. As mentioned, this contract should naturally also apply for the charter company.
You've truly considered both aspects, yes, because it's not solely the side of the skipper, but either skipper, the charter company themselves also need to feel genuinely comfortable and accommodating. So that's also the information that will be made public with the fair contract, that it will be taken over. The next from, as I said, the 2 EBI as well as the ICOMIA. Articles will come from that in the boat magazine. You guys, if you can't get enough of our webinar and want to further educate yourselves literature-wise with the excellent materials we have available, which is a fantastic way to truly deepen your understanding and of course intensify that whole learning process, we wholeheartedly recommend to you the entire topic we went through, Die Haftung des Skippers, the book that Dr. Schockel has already written, the 2nd edition. If you're interested and would like to, you can simply scan this QR code and have the book ordered online, all from the comfort of your home.
So we are actually just about at the very end now, Sami. It's really important to note that the final slide also contains 2 addresses, which we have included there for everyone. That means I unfortunately wasn't able to answer a very great many of the questions today. Some of them were too detailed, but we've got, for example, skipper80-pool.at and skipper80-pool.de. That means Sammy and his team would be the ones responsible for handling that. You're very welcome to
get in touch. We look forward to your calls, so please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly. We are genuinely excited and more than ready to address all of your remaining questions in greater depth, as we truly value your active participation and engagement. It's a real pleasure and a priority for us to offer more detailed, personalized explanations and dedicated support, ensuring you are left with absolutely all the necessary information to feel completely confident and well-informed about your upcoming decisions and next steps. On every single email, we answer them and genuinely look forward to your calls. I do hope you enjoyed the webinar, and I am very much looking forward to hearing your feedback. And I'd like to thank you all, and a special thanks to you as well. Thank you so much, Michael, for hosting this webinar.
I still have a bit of a job that I need to wrap up here, Sammy, and man, some of these are really persistent, which I honestly really like. And I've got 2 questions there. One question I have is actually from, that one's coming from Christoph, that particular question. I'm Austrian and hold the Croatian coastal license with YACHT-POOL insurance. Yeah, well, we mentioned that earlier. That also applies to the question that came up. I noticed that someone had actually asked me if I have an SBFC, SKS, or SSS. That was Alexander, yeah. It's not about the certificate, but I can tell you if you've got the SHS, you'll typically make a lot fewer mistakes that actually end up causing damage, because the training is just that thorough. If you have the Croatian coastal license, where we know the learning effort is much, much smaller than for the SKS or SBFC, then it can happen that you unconsciously do something that's actually a no-go. That means you are fully insured with the license, but if damage occurs because you, for instance, had the windows open during a tacking maneuver, then you might very well have to face the question yourself. How good is my training? And that's why I can only summarize. The training is what's important and not the license. You've said it correctly, Sammy. People with Croatian coastal licenses who've done lots of skipper training and many nautical miles are very good skippers. That's not an exclusion criterion.
I'm in complete agreement with you on this. We have everything ready, and as I've already stated, just pick up the phone and give us a call to register, and we'll also send you the confirmation, because it absolutely has to be insured.
And if you're interested and feel like it. I've now displayed a QR code that takes you directly to a form showing all the pricing details, which you can review at your own pace. For me, it was really important that today, even though we went a bit over time, Sammy, yeah, we thought we would run over a little bit, but it was crucial because there were just so many questions that really showed me you were with us right until the very end. Congratulations. I had an absolute blast, and we'll be keeping this webinar available on YouTube for the next 3 or 4 days, so you can still watch it normally over that period of time. And then, like all webinars, they will be on www.skipper360.de, our video portal. And finally, maybe just one last thing, we are both YACHT-POOL and Blue 2. Next, this week, I almost startled myself. It's already this week. We are at the Tallinn Trade Show, and we would, of course, be super happy if you visited us.
I wanted to add, Michael, the webinar at YACHT-POOL too, also on the website as well, or to be more precise, if we're also looking forward to your visit, just feel free to do it, come on by. And as I mentioned again, simply via email or by giving us a call. We're genuinely looking forward to every single call, because there are no unjustified questions, there are only justified questions, and we are always happy to explain things in advance, so you can see for yourself how personally everything is handled. Yes, the entire process, how personally everything is handled.
Sammy takes all of this very seriously, which means you can always give us a call. And I just want to say, I truly wish you a really fantastic sailing season ahead. And for those without skipper's liability insurance, I saw some questions. Yes, there is definitely an order of priority, and it's something we really should be taking a closer look at now. But skipper's liability insurance, I'd say, is a must. and all the others, you need to think about them depending on your skill level. And then I wish you all a pleasant evening, a successful sailing season, and thank you, Sammy, to you and YACHT-POOL for us having successfully managed to do it for the second time. I'll just leave that up for a little while longer. So, bye.
Bye. Have a nice evening, everyone.